Conflict in the South China Sea. What is going on? In 2013, a U.S. guided missile ship veered sharply to avoid a Chinese naval vessel that tried to block its path in the disputed South China Sea. In 2014, the United States said a Chinese fighter jet buzzed within 30 feet of one of its Navy's planes. China is building an artificial island that are entitled to a 500-meter safety zone to legitimize their claims to the South China Sea. In the article, vague rules increase risk of U.S.-China naval conflict. The White House called it a deeply concerning provocation. There is currently a struggle for power over having the territorial and economic rights over the waters of the South China Sea. China's claims. Chinese President Xi Jinping agrees with his country's uncompromising claim to the South China Sea and pledges that they would not bully their weaker neighbors. Jinping said, "The South China Sea islands have been China's territory since ancient times, and this is where China earns its claim to the South China Sea." For many years, China has claimed that the entire South China Sea is their territory. China sees the extension of its territory as part of its rise to status as the world's newest superpower. Recent incidents. On October 27th, the U.S. Navy conducted a freedom of navigation operation through the South China Sea. This came after months of deliberation amongst the White House and the Pentagon. This was not a mission that was meant to assert U.S. dominance over Beijing. The USS Lassen came within 12 nautical miles of China's artificially constructed Subi Reef in the Spratly Islands and was accompanied by 2 surveillance aircraft. The Lassen was not allowed to turn on sensors or fly helicopters. Military experts say if both actions were conducted, it would have been clear that the U.S. was conducting a freedom of navigation operation. A freedom of navigation operation is a legal exercise to reinforce the United States as interpreted by international maritime law. A freedom of navigation is intended to challenge maritime claims that the United States considers excessive under international law. Instead, it was an innocent passage which does not carry nearly the same weight as a freedom of navigation. This action was not a strong message to Beijing, therefore China will not be convinced to change its behavior regarding the dispute region. Recent incidents continued. The U.S. has promised to conduct future freedom of navigation operations throughout the South China Sea. 2 U.S. B-52 strategic bombers flew near the Chinese artificially built islands located in the South China Sea. In early November, the U.S. were contacted by the Chinese ground controllers, but continued their missions regardless. The latest mission was November 9, 2015, when U.S. bombers flew in the area of the Spratly Islands, but stayed away from the 12 nautical mile zone that China claims is territory around the islands it has built. The bombers were conducting a routine mission in the South China Sea, taking off and returning to Guam. The United States must be careful not to overassert its naval power closer to China's maritime claims. International actors. China's 9-dash line is a U-shaped designation on the map extending from Hainan, China's southernmost territory, encompassing about 90% of the South China Sea. This includes overlapping territory that should be controlled by Vietnam, Brunei, Malaysia, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Indonesia. Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, the Philippines, and Taiwan have rival claims in the region. China's president said that some Chinese islands are currently being occupied by other countries, but vowed that China has peaceful intentions. He said, "There are never any problems with the freedom of navigation and overflight, nor will there ever be any in the future, because China needs unimpeded commerce through these waters more than anyone else. This is tough to believe because China is becoming one of the world's superpowers along with America and Russia." International law. The U.S. and China are stepping up efforts to implement assets of military communication agreements. The problem is that protocols in place are mostly non-binding, contain exceptions, and at times are interpreted differently by the two sides. Agreements include the Code for Unplanned Encounters at Sea, or CEUS, signed in 2014 by China, United States, and other Western Pacific nations, which set out rules such as safe speeds and distances, the language used in communication, and actions in case a ship becomes disabled. CEUS does not cover Coast Guard or other civilian vessels, which China uses this to their advantage to back its vast territorial claims. This was only designed to avert incidents caused by reckless or somewhat overly assertive Navy captains in open waters. The CEUS agreement addresses unplanned encounters at sea regardless of any territorial claims, says Captain Jeff Davis, a Pentagon spokesman. China and the United States signed a Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU, which set the rules of behavior in air and sea encounters. MOU refers to military vessels' actions at sea, which implies to territorial and international waters. In addition to that agreement, both sides addressed everything from the correct radio frequency to use during distress calls to the wrong physical behaviors to use during crisis. Broader parameters are set by the United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea, or UNCLOS. As well as this, it provides countries to set 12 nautical miles from their coast to treat as a sovereign territory, and an additional 200 miles as Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ. The U.S. is insisting that normal military activities are allowed in an EEZ under UNCLOS, and surveillance is included in this. Tensions are high, although cooperation between the U.S. and Chinese militaries has been increasing in recent years. Each side is agreeing to maintain communication and agree to protocols to avoid these clashes. Deterrence and the U.S. response. The 200-mile zone does not entitle a country to prevent what is known as innocent passage of ships by other countries. The United States keeps sailing or flying by to show that it does not recognize any rules other than internationally recognized ones when it comes to the law of the sea. The United States must express caution when conducting these missions because it could create unneeded tensions between the two economic powerhouses. International level of analysis. Using a comprehensive analysis of the situation in the South China Sea is the best way to study and understand the patterns and interactions that are taking place in this region of the world. This encompasses international relations as a whole and will not leave out important information when explaining the issues occurring in the South China Sea. Taking into account all international actors and what they have at stake is also important. America is basically telling China they do not rule the South China Sea because of international law. China says they have claim to the sea because it is in their heritage. Malaysia feels threatened and encroached in its 200-mile exclusive economic zone. Indonesia might take China to international court to secure its hold over the hydrocarbon-rich waters around its country. Freedom of navigation operations are a legal exercise the U.S. uses to assert power, but the recent action were only innocent passage, which did not send a strong message to China, but also helped avoid greater conflict. International laws, including CEUS, MOU, and UNCLOS, will serve as guidelines for future incidents over territory disputes in the South China Sea. Moving forward. China claims most of the South China Sea, which more than $5 trillion in global trade passes through each year, and the United States will continue conducting patrols to monitor those passage of goods. The U.S. Navy describes how they are likely to carry out another patrol before the year is over. The next patrol is planned to take place sometime this December. The U.S. defense officials are also planning 2 or more patrols per quarter in the Spratly Islands region to stress the United States' rights under international law and to also remind China that the U.S. is not agreeing with the artificial formation of islands. On November 12, 2015, Obama demanded China to halt the reclamation of the land, turning the 7 reefs into artificial islands. America must be careful to not overexpress its power, even if they are abiding by international law, because China is an up-and-coming superpower with a large influence on trade. Unnecessarily angering them is not a smart idea. America must act rational to avoid war because of the many important factors that are being put at stake from the making of these artificial islands.